All right, welcome back to another episode of Brand and Bang. And today we're going to talk about a topic that nobody likes to talk about. It's like when your boss is your friend and where's the line, right?
Yeah,
Everybody wants a cool boss until things get complicated.
right.
My question today is it possible to be friends with your boss without it affecting your career? And at what point does friendly turn into messy? Right? So, first, I
Right.
think what we need to do is define the relationships. So, tell me, what do you think, being friendly versus being friends are?
Yeah. So thinking back, I feel like being friendly with your boss is always good, right?
Mhm.
You should always have a cordial relationship with them, and it means that you're supportive of each other, what you're working on. You feel like you have some good communication, but maybe there's a line, right? Like you talk about things at work, but maybe you don't talk about, and you might mention things at home, but you don't talk about like the deeper stuff, right? And
Mhm.
I think it crosses the line into friends when you start to have those deeper conversations about maybe, a fight you had with your spouse or
Yeah.
surgery your dog had or whatever. Or
Yeah.
maybe a surgery for a dog isn't that deep, but
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
So it sounds like, being friendly is just kind of like, you know, being in an office with somebody who you're approachable and you can just provide support for them. But being friends is more like a emotional tie, like a soul tie, like you say, you give them all this information. And so,
mhm,
but at the end of the day, no matter how close you are to someone, one person still signs a paycheck. So they still have, whether you're friends or not, they still have the upper hand because they signed the checks. So always gotta, take that into consideration. Um, and also the power dynamics never change. Even if you feel like you are friends with your boss and you're friends. So in your mind, you're friends and you might be on equal playing ground, but you're not because the power
yeah.
dynamic is still different.
Unless though, what if that friendship gets you a promotion?
Nepotism, sort of.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that in itself is like a negative too, right? Because then
Yeah.
other people will look at that and think that maybe you got that promotion just because of your friendship, or maybe you only had that friendship. It was manufactured to get that
Get the
promotion.
yeah. And, and this is where like some of the red flags come in, right? Red
Mhm.
flags that you've crossed the line. We talk about getting a position because you're friends with that person. Another thing is that they kind of like treat you differently because you're friends. Have you ever experienced that being a friend of a boss or even being on the flip side where you see a relationship with people and they're like overstepping and they're getting away with things that you could never get away with?
You know, it's funny. I feel like looking back on my relationships with my bosses that they were all friendly.
Yeah.
Um, and it was never actually a real friendship, even though maybe at times they tried to make it seem like one, and I was, like,
Good friend.
misled a little bit to trust them with things that they weren't really being honest about.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I had a boss as a friend one time who, like, knew I was being underpaid by, like ridiculously underpaid by, like, $75,000. It was a lot of money.
Yeah.
Um, knew it the whole time, pretended to be a friend, and then when I finally figured it out, just, admitted to it and bumped me up a little bit. And then I had another boss as a friend one time who kept telling me, "Oh, I have great plans for you, great plans for your future," but never could really tell me what they were.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely be
Yikes.
careful with bosses who pretend to be your friend as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. And to also add to that, the red flag to me is when things kind of like conflict kind of feels personal instead of professional.
Yeah,
See, you never want that. And then also you don't want to feel obligated to say yes to your boss because they ask you to do something just because we're friends.
so
It's
true.
hard to say no to somebody who's your friend, who's also your boss, because you're like, oh, we're friends, and you don't want to like mess that relationship up. But then you don't want to do it, but you have to say, so it gets really murky. So I would just be like, yeah, the line gets way too blurry when you are friends boss or boss friends or however you want to put that. Too
Absolutely.
murky. Yeah.
I would avoid that. Just avoid it altogether.
Just avoid it at all costs. So you talk about avoiding it at all costs. So I think some of the risk that you can't ignore is like your perceived favoritism, right? That can
Mm,
damage your reputation, which you talk about.
absolutely.
Another one is setting boundaries
Mhm.
later. So how do you feel how that would play into this type of relationship?
That would be really tough, right? Like, if
Yeah,
you started this friendship, you were hanging out together outside of work
drinking.
as families, and then one day you're like, "Oh," like, you realize the mistake you made, and you're like, "Oh, no, we can't hang out anymore." There's gonna be hurt feelings because think about any regular friendship you've had when you didn't wanna hang out anymore. It got there's hurt feelings there.
Oh yeah,
It gets kinda
yeah.
hostile.
And I think also too the risk of your career relationship going sour because like you said, you setting boundaries and telling them no and then now you are scared because you don't know if something happens you're on the chopping block because now we're not really friends, you know, we're fake friends and now you feel like okay gosh, something's happening and you're like the first to go. So that
Right.
uncomfortable on edge kind of feeling, nobody wants that. So yeah, that's a tough situation to navigate. Yeah.
Yeah. And remember, because not all friendships like, think about your history of friendships, right? Have they all
Yeah.
worked out? No, like, not
No.
all friendships work out, so you are taking a big risk, and you're
Yeah.
risking your career.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about like how someone can maybe navigate it. Give us some practical advice for somebody listening, how they can navigate the friend boss or the boss friend relationship.
So, I would say, number 1, don't overshare, right?
Yeah.
Just be conscious of the information that you're giving them. If they try to ask you questions to get more, deeper information, change the subject, steer it back to work.
Yeah.
If they overshare, that's on them. Just don't overshare back, and then I think you'll be okay. I guess.
Yeah. And I can add to that too, like you mentioned earlier, is setting boundaries early. So
Mhm.
that goes into what you just said about sharing. Um, and I would say keep communication professional first, you know, because
Mhm.
sometimes people are in office and they think everything's a joke. And it's like, oh, let me just make this little lewd joke because we're friends, haha. But then the relationship gets sour and that little lewd joke that you thought was a joke now becomes an HR issue. So,
Yeah.
you want to be careful of that. Um,
Mhm.
Also, I would say that you could probably avoid exclusivity, right? So don't become the only one that your boss leans on. Like, let them turn to other people too. And I feel like if your boss comes to you and just constantly asking you to do things, would maybe turn that situation around and say, oh, you know what? Elle is probably a better marketer than me. How about we bring her in on the conversation and let her help? So you kind of like push things to other people because then you don't want to be the one that your boss is always calling for everything
Yeah.
when there's other employees. It's not like this is a one man show. There's other people there.
That's a great point because it's very easy to fall into the trap. Even if your boss isn't technically your friend, it's easy to fall into the trap of wanting to be the go-to person.
Hmm.
Right. Yeah, pull other people
Hmm.
in, share the work, or you're just gonna end up being burnt out trying
Exactly.
to maintain a
A
fake friendship.
friendship.
Yeah.
And another thing I want to talk about too is the having separate spaces, right? So
Mhm.
work is different from what you do outside of work. So keep those separate.
Yeah.
Not try to come into the. It's like people who are married and they work together and they bring like their home problems. They just had a fight last night, and then they come to the office and they fight last night because it's very obvious. See it on their faces, you see it in their attitude, you see it the way they talk to each other. So yeah, you want to keep those spaces separate when you have that kind of relationship and also be aware of the optics, just kind of like be aware of how other people view your relationship because it will rub people the wrong way whether you are trying to or not.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. And then lastly I would say when know when to pull back. So if you feel like things start to get a little too close, a little too messy, a little just too icky, it just feels more like a clique, a gossipy, or like a environment that just feels too icky. I would say reset to professionalism. Just kind of like step back, evaluate, reset. And even if resetting or evaluating might mean leaving that job and going somewhere else, that might be something you might want to consider, because is it worth losing your friendship with that person, losing your career, or just getting a real messy reputation? So those are the things you have to evaluate and just kind of like pull back.
Yeah, or maybe try transferring to another team or
Another
something.
team.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, there's a lot of options. Yeah, so here's how much time do we have left? So I have a quick question to ask you, a couple of questions. Like, let's do a little role
Keep
play
going.
right now,
You
right? Let's
can.
do a little role play. Oh, so here's one. So if your boss invites you to dinner regularly, like every Friday night, we're going to go hang out. Do you go?
Ooh, that's a tough one. So maybe a good middle ground is to
Yeah.
say, I would love to go. What about Susie? G- Can we invite the whole team?
Team
Maybe make
lunch.
it like a team dinner or
Yeah.
lunch. Yeah.
Yeah.
Lunch is definitely safer than dinner. Like
Yeah.
lunch, completely acceptable at any time. So maybe try to make it lunch and try to make it the whole team. Or you could do one on one lunch with your boss if you
Yeah.
bring like a work agenda.
True, because then dinner to me sounds a little secluded, a little romantic,
Yeah.
especially if it's a male boss or something. I don't know. For me, dinner just seems a little bit more personal
Mhm.
than lunch.
Agree. Yeah.
All right. So, what if they confide in you about company issues? Like, because, there's things that upper executives know that, employees don't know, as
Right.
it should be. But what if your boss is one of those people that's sitting in the C suite and they know a lot of stuff, and everything that happens in the C suite, they come and they tell you? What do you do about that? And what do you do about the information you're getting?
So that's definitely happened to me before. And
Yeah.
I'm just very careful not to tell anyone else and to just listen and take it in for your own data,
Yeah.
but keep it to yourself 100%. Don't get yourself involved in that.
Yeah. Yeah. I always live by a motto. You know me. My accent gets in the way sometimes. Listen, I live by a motto. And when it comes to like uh things people tell me, it's like only one person can keep a secret. And that one person is you. So the minute
Yeah.
you tell somebody else, it's no longer secret, because that person is going to tell somebody that they trust. And then that
Mhm.
person's going to tell somebody they trust. And so on and so on and so on. And so that's how, gossip, information, secrets get spread. Only one person can keep a secret.
Mm,
Anyway,
that's very
all
good
right.
and very true.
It's very true. All right. Here's my other one. So you get promoted, right?
Mhm,
How does your friendship change? Because your boss might be I don't know, a team lead, right? You're on the
mhm.
team, the boss is a team lead. You get promoted to maybe manager, which is above the team lead. How does your friendship change?
Now that you are above them,
Yeah. Mhm.
uh,
Just think.
I guess then you need to think through the dynamics differently, right? As a
Yeah.
boss, instead of an employee, there are definitely more concerns, I'd say, right? Because
Yeah.
you need to be careful not to show favoritism, not to be accused of any HR violations.
Yeah.
So I would say if I suddenly became the boss, I would be more wary of that friendship and I would back away some.
Okay. But then you back away and the person's going to be like, well, when I was your boss, I was nice to you. I did this. I. And now you change up on me. That's a conversation that you're going to have to think about having too, because they might have some type of feelings towards how you are not treating them versus how they used to treat you.
I know. I know. And I would say you know, don't be hurtful about it. It
Hmm.
depends on also how much you value that friendship, how close you did get.
Yeah.
But you could always set a boundary of, let's keep things professional at work. Um, or talk to them about your concerns and ask how they handled it when they were your
Mhm.
boss.
Yeah. Hmm.
Again, depending on how close that friendship is.
Yeah. All right. Well, here's my last feedback question. Yeah, my last question. Yeah. So You have to give your boss honest feedback, right? Tough criticisms. That's your boss. But
Mhm,
something happened, the boss dropped the ball. You, as
mhm,
the employee on the outside looking in, which is who's also your friend, and you have to sit your friend down and say, "Hey, man, you screwed up. You did bad. This is bad." Can you still do that? Can you still give your boss honest feedback, your boss friend, honest
mhm.
feedback without feeling like you have to tiptoe around them because, you're
Yeah.
friends?
So the thing is, in my friendships, like I feel like part of being a good friend is being honest with each other. So I feel like if I was actually friends, like real friends with my boss, then I would feel like I would be honest and I could be. And if I felt like I couldn't be honest, then
Oh,
I'd evaluate whether we were really friends in the first place.
that is true. That is true. Because not every relationship is a friendship, right?
Yeah.
Some is
Yeah.
just a professional acquaintance. So
Exactly.
that's
Right.
it. All right. So, okay, guys, thanks for staying with us to the end. So, my final takeaways for this segment is you can be friendly, but friendships require boundaries. We talk about that a lot
Mhm.
here. And the power dynamics don't disappear, they just get disguised in terms of what your position is. And then respect is always greater than comfort. Protect your peace and protect your career at all times. So, if that means redefining your friendship boss relationship, that's something you need to do. And you don't need to be friends with your boss to be successful. You just need to have clarity on the relationship. So thanks for joining us on another episode of Brandon Bank, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Bye,
Thanks,
guys.
everyone. Bye.